Hi everyone, Michelle from Holistic Pillars. Now, Holistic Pillars is obviously a platform I created to share a personal transformation and the things that I've learnt along the way. But most importantly for me, it was about building my support crew and people that would rally around me to support the transformational changes that I wanted to make. And so today I'm thrilled to have Narelle Donald with me. Now, Narelle is a naturopath I'll get you to talk about your business,
Yeah.
and has been working with me probably for, we think, around about 10, 12, 13 years, and has been integral in supporting my lifestyle changes. So welcome, Narelle, and thanks for coming along.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Michelle.
So first of all, I would love to know a bit about your background. So your interest in natural therapies, and then we'll go into more around what they are.
Sure. So I actually wasn't interested in natural therapies growing up, and my mum wasn't someone who was really into natural therapies or anything like that. And when I finished high school, I went overseas for 12 months to Germany. And one of the families, so I was an exchange student, one of the families, the mother was a naturopath. And something about her and her energy and her beliefs and what she did fascinated me. And I was just absolutely intrigued by her life philosophies and what she sort of brought to her household and what she did. And I sort of thought in the back of my mind, I'm going to pursue this and look into it further. And I came back and I went to university and I did a degree in sociology and psychology. And I was all ready to go on and become an academic. And all of a sudden, something went in my mind, no, this isn't right. You can't do this. And I dropped out and I rang a school that offered naturopathy at the time. And they said, we can't take you, our course is full. And I said, oh, no, you want me. I'm really good at what I do. Like, I don't even know where that came from. And what I was fortunate in was the woman who was the admissions officer had also studied sociology and taught sociology at the college. So when she knew that that was my background, she went, oh, yes, you can come in. And I got in. So I studied naturopathy. When I finished, that was another 4 years. I did a little bit of traveling, and essentially I've been working as a naturopath, and I have subsequently done a little more in homeopathy since 2000, essentially. So 20 years, but I've been qualified for about 22.
Wow, isn't it funny how you think you're going in one direction and then something pulls you in another one, and then you just got to go with your gut and go with it, because it's very good at what you do.
Yeah.
So yes, I've been on my journey with you, and I've been, certainly believing in natural therapy. I don't know why, but I just feel good when I've been to see you and you give me some remedies, and it supports also, modern medicine and all of the likes of. I guess for people just starting out or looking for or intrigued in natural therapies and what it might be for them or do for them, what is naturopathy and what is homeopathy?
Yep.
What's the difference between the two, and why would I go and see you?
Okay. So what naturopathy is essentially naturopaths are like the GPs of natural medicine or alternative medicine. I don't really like the term alternative because a lot of medications are derived from plants and herbal medicines anyway. But naturopaths essentially, some will go down a certain pathway and specialize in a certain area. That's not what I've done. I've remained quite general. And what we essentially do is when you come to us, it's more about something not working right for you. So it might be that you come and say, look, I'm just tired all the time and my skin keeps flaring up and I've got these digestive issues. So they can be these really vague issues that just mean you're not feeling well and you're not functioning at your best. And so what we do is we take all of these symptoms and we try and figure out where your body needs help and support. And how we do that is through diet, so changes in diet and removing foods that we know are quite irritating to the digestive system or that you might have a sensitivity to. We use herbal medicines, which generally I mix up my own, but every so often I'll use sort of a tablet form that's pre-formulated. And the herbs work very much on the physical part, and we use those for things like liver or bitter herbs for digestion. And then we also will have homeopathy. And what homeopathy is it's essentially a form of medicine that has been, or was around the time when modern medicine was starting to come through. And there were sort of two pathways, and the world sort of went the modern medicine pathway. But essentially, that's based on the idea that like cures like. So, very small amounts of a medicine or of a substance, the symptoms that it produces in these small amounts will cure those symptoms. And so we tend to use that, for example, hay fever season. People usually get the runny nose and the watery eyes. And one of the medicines that we use in homeopathy is allium cepa or red onion. And if you think about red onion, when you chop it up, runny nose, watery eyes. So it's that matching the symptoms. Another one is we use caffeine or coffea, which is caffeine, and we use that for people who are having difficulty sleeping or agitated, getting that palpitation or rapid beating of the heart. So it's about matching the symptoms. So they're sort of the main areas that we look at. And we do work also with people with chronic conditions. So I have see people with fibromyalgia. I treat people who are undergoing chemotherapy or radiation treatment. And then I also will treat people who just have all these kind of, as I said, obscure symptoms that mean they're just not feeling well or functioning at their very best. And then it's my job to try and figure out why and support the body so that it rebalances and goes back into that state of homeostasis.
You lead me beautifully into my next sort of question, because if I was to walk into you and I'm coming to see you, like, how do you assess me? Like, do you need blood work from the doctor? Like, is it more a conversation combined with blood work combined with lifestyle? Like, how do you start to peel the onion, so to speak?
So for me, I'm very much into conversation. I'm a great chatter. I love to have that. I like to see how you function in the world. And that's probably partly my background with the sociology and the psychology. So I don't do a lot of testing, but if someone brings in their blood tests, I do look at them, because we do tend to look at blood tests a little bit different to what medicine does. So we're looking for where those parameters are either close to the edges, so they're not abnormal, they're not out of the normal range, but they're close to the edge, or they're moving in a certain direction. So yes, I do look at bloods, but most of my consulting is done via talking and asking people to identify their symptoms. So you might say to me, well, I've got a headache. And I'll say, oh, okay, where's the headache? And you'll say, oh, it's here. And then I'll be, well, is there anything that makes it better or worse? Is it a sort of pain? When does it happen? Is it happening in relation to your menstrual cycle? Is it happening when you don't get enough sleep? Is it happening? What situations? So we're trying to build a symptom picture so that we can then decide what's that best match for you. Is it herbs? Do we need to change your diet? For example, is your headache after you've eaten a big heavy meal at night and had a couple of glasses of wine? So essentially, I do it mainly through conversation, but there are a lot of naturopaths now who use different forms and different ways of assessing. It's just not what I do, and probably also because I did my studying in the mid-90s, so it's very different now. That sort of has a huge difference in education.
Yeah, that's good actually, because I recently came to see you because I was feeling really lethargic and flat and really lacked a bit of energy, and I just felt like I needed a reset. But the first thing you did was look through my past few years of coming to you at about the same time every year with the same symptoms.
Yeah.
And I don't mind you talking about the fact that I need more sunshine at this time of the year or whatever it might be. And and voila, I've got some, I just, felt $1 million, but
Yeah, and that's what we look for. So there's this really common patterns, and that's what we're trying to find is the common pattern. So it's not about you coming to me and saying, I'm tired, and I say, well, here, have this to pep you up. I'm sort of looking and thinking, well, why are you tired? Because when I look back, you were tired this time last year and you were tired this time the year before. So for a lot of people at the end of winter, our vitamin D is at the lowest because of where the sun's sitting on the horizon and where we are in terms of our latitude. We just don't get vitamin D from the sun. So we know it's low, and then we do know that affects mood, and we know that winter and being inside. So we know that that's caused that stress on the body, and then that can create the fatigue and cause the problems there. So that's exactly what we're looking for. Where are the patterns? And once you start that conversation with people, people get really good at telling you. Like I have so many clients who'll come in and say, right, that mix isn't any good for me because this has changed and this and this and this and this. I'm like, oh, right, perfect, here you go. We alter it up and off they go again. People get very, very aware of how their body reacts to what's going on in the world. And when you become aware of that, you just can catch things so much earlier before they can become something that's a more difficult problem or a chronic disease.
And that was definitely that light bulb moment for me when you went on telehealth with me and said, you know that your symptoms were this last year? And I went, oh, okay, yeah, they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also added onto that is COVID and, the stress, not doing all that extra exercise of walking around and go to work and all of those sort of things that I think did magnify the issue for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And losing the social contact and that face-to-face contact, it's very different talking to a screen than talking to somebody in person and interacting with people in person. So, yeah, COVID has not been an easy time for most people.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have had, as you know, a number of issues with health things, and we've sort of gotten to them, but you've always been one of my go-tos. Now, it's all around metabolic health. So I have a particular interest in metabolic health and managing disease through lifestyle changes, which is what I set about doing and have successfully or are successfully maintaining that. Now, when it comes to those metabolic diseases, and I might talk specifically to, say, increased blood sugar or insulin resistance and those sort of things, I'd like to sort of really sort of, again, explain to people what they are, and we can treat them through modern medicine, of course, and then through lifestyle changes. But how can your naturopathy, homeopathy support reducing insulin resistance and cortisol levels and all of those sort of things? Can we go down that little line?
We can. So, and this is an area that I do treat a lot of people in. And when someone comes in with something like insulin resistance or starting to show a metabolic imbalance, and often it's not always to do with their blood sugar levels, it's really a lot of inflammation in the body. And so insulin resistance creates inflammation. We all know that. Most professions in any sort of healthcare are aware of that. Now, so what we have a look at, and what I always look at first, is stress levels, because the more stressed somebody is, the more their body will be inflamed. But we also have a look at what their digestion's doing. So this is sort of twofold. You'll get some people who come in who will have a very high sugar intake. And people will say to me, oh, I don't eat much sugar. But then you have a look at the list of the foods they're eating, and there's a lot of hidden sugar in the food. And what we're trained to do is pick a food up and have a look at the nutritional analysis, not pick a food up and have a look at what the ingredients are. So that's the first area that I always start with. An example is I recently was running a program, just a 28-day clean eating program. And my sister-in-law was doing the program, and she said, I've changed my dairy across to soy and it tastes really nice. And I said to her, could you read the ingredients? And she comes back and she's like, oh, damn, how did you know? Of course, the second ingredient was sugar. So that's a really big starting point, is that whole education over what you're eating, and also having a look at the type of carbohydrate you're eating. So some people are really comfortable going to pure paleo and going into that real low carb or no carb, other than fruit and veggies. But there are people, and particularly people with anxiety and depression, who do need a little bit of carbohydrates because that's needed to make some amino acids like tryptophan, for example. But it's the quality. And so what you're looking for is you're looking for whole grains, and you're also looking for really low processed grains. So we start with that in terms of that dietary part. The second thing, though, that we start on is what's your digestive system doing? So your pancreas is the thing that secretes insulin along with other digestive juices to actually break the food apart. If your pancreas is not functioning very well, then you're not going to be breaking that food apart. And then that means that those nutrients, A, aren't being absorbed into your body, but also you're getting the wrong, not, I guess, waste products that normally would be excreted out. And what that creates is an immune response and then an inflammation response. And also then your liver gets overwhelmed. So the more your liver gets overwhelmed, the less you're able to digest and actually absorb these nutrients. So we have a really big look at that. And then, as I said, mentioned earlier with the stress, that's huge. And what happens with stress is that, first of all, we believe we're being chased by a bear. It really is that simple. Our body thinks that there's a giant bear or a tiger or whatever you want chasing you. So what it wants to do is it wants very energy dense foods. And so what your body says is have the sugar, have those easy carbs that I can really get into big glucose, because your brain prefers glucose as a source of energy. So your body naturally craves those sorts of foods. But then over time, what it's also going to do is start to slow your digestion down, because what your body doesn't want to do is, when you're running from the bear, is to be digesting food. So what happens when your digestion slows down? You start to not be able to process the sugars and the carbohydrates, which creates this burden on your body. And sugar, I always think of my mum, a long, long time ago, worked at the Royal Melbourne Show in the fairy floss department, or the little fairy floss caravan. And by the end of her 10 days at the show, the sugar in the fairy floss had actually eroded her watch band away completely and eaten away the soles of her shoes. So if you think of that in your body, if that sugar, if your body can't deal with the sugar, it actually is a massive irritant to the blood vessels. And it's also a massive irritant to all this very small circulation, which is in things like your eyes and your fingertips and your toes and your kidneys and your joints. So you're getting this effect where that inflammation really starts to cause havoc through the body, which then creates more problems, and you start to get in this vicious circle and you create more stress. And that's really how we have a look at the metabolic syndrome. There's a few other factors that come into play. For women, there can be hormonal issues, not for every female, and that's often got to do with the stress response. And we start to see these problems with things like polycystic ovaries and the syndrome associated with that. But really, for most people, when they're looking at a problem with insulin resistance or with something like type 2 diabetes, it is about lifestyle first and foremost. And what we're trying to do is make sure people are educated and make that choice if they want to. Some people don't, and that's their decision. Healthcare is about choosing and choice, but it's also about giving them the opportunity to reverse this condition that creates so many problems long term. I hope that answered your question.
Oh, that's brilliant. No, it's very good, because it's not one strategy fits all, or one.
No.
So you've got. I recently, I don't know if I told you, but I recently had a CGM on for 2 weeks, like a continuous glucose monitor for 2 weeks. Yeah. I've done it a few times over the last few years, and just to see where I'm at with my response to certain foods, or and it was so interesting because it might be my blood group, my blood went up, my readings went up whenever I exercised. So if I was under stress, or it was almost in the morning with that, was it the dawn phenomenon, where your sugars will go morning because you're getting ready to get up and go, and your body automatically knows this. And so I was just really interested in, because I was thinking, oh my God, my blood sugars are going up, but it's actually natural, but they were responding really well and coming back down.
Yeah. So the dawn stuff happens because your cortisol levels start to rise because you want to get up and moving. So you want glucose into your body. You want your blood sugar levels to increase so that you're giving the energy to both your brain and your muscles. Same thing with exercise. It's a really common thing that your blood sugar should naturally rise when you're exercising because you're trying to feed the muscle. You want the muscle to have the energy to function.
It's just fascinating. And can you talk a bit more about cortisol? Because I know we talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
What is it? And I know it's a stress hormone, but predominantly what is that?
Yeah, sure. So cortisol is a natural stress hormone, and we all think of cortisol as something really negative and bad, but it's actually not. Cortisol is the thing that gives you the get up and go. It's a very motivating, energizing hormone. So you need it so that you're not sitting on the couch every day doing nothing. But what happens when you're under a long-term stress response is that cortisol is secreted over time at a much higher rate than what you need. So initially, let's use the example of the bear. The bear's chasing you. So what your body does, it secretes or produces adrenaline and noradrenaline to deal with that immediate response. When that response continues, it ups the cortisol levels because it needs to stay in that state of this is long-term stress. We need to bunker down so we can manage it. So over time, that becomes exhausted. And that's when we start to see these long-term problems with stress. So initially, there'll be a change in blood sugar levels. There'll be a change in other hormones. So you can have reproductive hormones are a common one. Your digestion will start to change. So you can see things like irritable bowel syndrome, where there's that diarrhea and constipation. But then as it gets totally exhausted, we start to see some other more problematic changes. And one of the biggest things is a change in your circadian rhythm. So when you naturally should be having cortisol, which we just talked about in that early morning rise, all of a sudden the cortisol doesn't rise in the morning. So you wake up feeling exhausted. And that's the prime sign that we know the stress response is not quite right. So people who wake up and even if they've had 10 hours sleep, they're absolutely exhausted. And then usually the cortisol starts to rise mid-morning or late afternoon. And that's when you'll see people have more energy at night, when really it should be the melatonin starting to come in and people starting to be sleepy and ready to relax and rejuvenate overnight. So you very commonly see this cortisol switch with the melatonin, and the circadian rhythm goes pear-shaped. The other thing, though, that cortisol also does, and I'm speaking very simplistic here, but essentially it says, okay, that bear is not nicking off. That's going to be chasing me for a long while. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to deposit some fat because I might need that fat later on. So it deposits that fat right around the middle, very, very common place for the fat stores to go. And so a lot of people will have that persistent waste sort of levels of fat. And then we eventually will get to the point where the cortisol just ain't happening whatsoever. And when that happens, you're starting to see that absolute sheer exhaustion where people just cannot get through the day without stimulants, without caffeine. And they might be drinking sort of, look, I've had people drink 8 to 10 cups of coffee a day. So then your adrenal glands just can't manage. And they just like, yeah, I can't keep pumping out this cortisol. We're done. We're shutting down until something changes. So that's sort of a brief kind of description of how we view cortisol and the problems that it has long term. But certainly it impacts every endocrine gland. And we're talking about the thyroid, we're talking about the pancreas in terms of the digestive enzymes, but particularly the insulin, reproductive hormones, neurotransmitters. It impacts everything.
Which is why stress is such a huge factor to manage well. And so what strategies would you give people about just managing that stress? I mean, we know.
Yeah, and yeah, stress is a really almost, I think probably about 90 to 100% of what I see is related to stress. And I think sometimes we purely see stress as a emotional moment or a physical moment. We might have had an operation, or we might have had a death in the family, or a divorce, or something that's a life event. And certainly that does create stress, but stress can be anything. Stress can be being pregnant and then having to recover. Stress can be doing year 12. Stress can be working long term in a job and long hours and not getting enough sleep. Stress could be catching a virus. I know we shouldn't talk about that at the moment, but it can be catching a chronic virus that lingers and loiters for a long time after. So stress really is anything that creates distress or makes the body struggle to stay on top of. And so when we're looking at stress, we all need some stress in our life. So there's a positive stress, which we term eustress or EU stress. And that means that we need that to be motivated. That's cortisol at its best. But when it switches to distress, that's when we start to see these physical changes. So in terms of how we look at it, first and foremost, you have to address the lifestyle factors. And so one thing that I commonly do if someone is really stressed is I'm like the soup Nazi and say no more exercise unless it's gentle, like yoga or walking or Tai Chi, because I don't want to create extra stress that the body's got to deal with. I want them to start recovering. And then we'll have a look at some dietary changes, and often we'll remove, look, the stimulants I tend to look at first. So caffeine we reduce, alcohol we significantly reduce or remove, and anything with added sugar is a big one. And then we start to have a look at any other areas that might need a little bit of help. So common with people who are stressed is anxiety. And again, a high percentage of my clients will suffer some form of anxiety, even if they don't realise it's anxiety because it's not that full-blown panic attack. So we have a look at that. And in terms of how we support that, we always want people to have adequate amount of sleep. And generally we'll use herbs to help support both as the anxiety part of it, but both to try and build the body back up again. But realistically, for long-term stress, you're looking at about 6 to 12 months of support before that people can get themselves back on track. So it's not a short-term quick fix, like if you've got a headache or something like that. But that's essentially what we have a look at. And look, I'm a very big advocate for mindfulness, all of that sort of stuff. Some people don't like it. You know, it's certainly an art, and I'm pretty useless at it, but I still keep trying. One day I'm going to be brilliant at it. So we're also looking at that sort of thing as well to try and improve that. But that's generally where we would start.
And that, of course, leads me into your program.
Yes.
I just did it. I just did it for the 28 days and loved it. Do you want to tell everyone about the program? And obviously it pretty much is everything we've been talking about, but do you want to just talk about the program and your business and where you are? And
Sure. So I ran the program and started the program because, first of all, I was stuck at home with COVID, so I was not allowed to see people face to face. And I was sort of thinking of a way of reaching out to more people to sort of just understand how big diet is in the scheme of a foundation for health, but also trying to see and encourage people to be more aware of what they're eating and how it impacts them physically, mentally, and emotional. So I did the program as a 28 days, and it's called 28 to Feeling Great. And my guarantee is that everyone feels better after the 28 days. And after running it for the past couple of months, it's certainly been the case. And it's essentially a clean eating program where you're taking out any processed foods, you're taking out foods that will irritate the body, So like your added sugar, alcohol, reducing your caffeine down, and you're filling instead the body up with really nutritious foods. So whole grains, fruits, veggies, oily fish, all that sort of stuff that you want to eat. Now, I'm a shocking cook. I'm going to be very open about that. I cannot cook to save myself. And in fact, my lovely husband does all the cooking in our house because I am horrendous at cooking. So I really didn't think that I was very qualified to give people recipes, but I also didn't want to. I wanted people to have their own scope on making it fit into their lifestyle. So, for example, this time when I did it, because it is something that I do once or twice a year, I went vegan because I thought I've never been vegan before. Let's give this a shot. So I went vegan and loved it. I knew that some people like the more paleo or very low carb diet. And so I had a lot of people do it that way. And then I had a lot of people just switch things out to going to a whole grain, wheat-free bread, cutting that down, only eating white meat, but increasing their fruit and veggies. So it was trying to fit into people's lifestyles. And then along the way, what I also decided that I wanted to do was just give people a taste of the common things that I would see in clinic. So obviously changing their diet, then having a look at digestion, and then we did a little bit on alcohol, hormones, sleep, and stress. And so that was sort of the premise of what I would essentially look at when most people initially come in clinic. Because if you don't have those foundations of health and wellness right, it's very difficult then to build on top of that. You're really then just patching, whereas what my whole aim is to rebuild people so that they feel fabulous and are functioning on all cylinders with that real pep in their step. So now I'm back in clinic. So I do both in-clinic and telehealth consultations. So I have pivoted across to telehealth as well. And essentially I work with a whole host of people and issues. I don't really specialise in anything because I like the interest of that sort of finding and discovering what's going on with people. So I work a lot of stress and anxiety, a lot of digestive health. I do a lot of fertility. I do a lot, as I said, of that sort of coordinated care with people who are using or on chemotherapeutics, so having cancer for that sort of thing. So that's sort of the basis. I do a fair bit of thyroid stuff as well. And that's sort of the basis where I really like to work with my clients long term so that they kind of move in and out as they're feeling great, they're off they go and they're fabulous. And then they might have some things that kind of wear them down a little bit and back in they come and we fix them up and off they go. So I really do like that long-term sort of working with my clients. But I am going to, hopefully next year, I'm not sure when, but I am going to start doing a lot more of programs. So having a look and doing sort of short courses on things like stress and anxiety, and just looking at ways that people can change what they're doing in their day-to-day life, but also making people aware of the choices that they're making in terms of lifestyle and diet and how that can make them feel better in a really inexpensive, easy thing to do. So that's sort of my long-term plans.
That's brilliant. I just think that there's so much out there that people don't know. And if they're not feeling fantastic, there's a reason why. Because I know years ago when I was in a bit of a crisis, I just didn't know where to go for help. And I think just to have these conversations and to have a platform like yours with mine, we can just educate people that there's opportunity, there's hope, you know, and just some key tidbits on where to go, what to expect, where you can get the help from. And I just think that makes, you know, a huge difference. You got the enthusiasm to help people, because I know you also a Pilates instructor, so you
do that on the side. That's right.
The energy levels and all that sort of stuff.
And saying that too, I think that a lot of people think naturopaths, look, unfortunately there are a few that are very, very left of centre, but really a lot of naturopaths we're all about working with where you're at. So a lot of people think that they're going to go to a naturopath and we're going to say, well, don't take that and get off that medication, which is nothing that we're doing. And if they're a good naturopath, they're going to work with where you are at. And I will get some people in who'll say, well, don't take my coffee away because I'm not changing it. I'll be like, well, okay, well, how about we try and halve it? Or some people will say, well, I'm okay, but I am going to eat a chocolate bar once a week. Okay, good. That's fine. Eat your chocolate bar once a week. So it really should be about working where you're at. And that's very much what I try to do. And even I now do also a little 15-minute free little consultation or just an idea where people can talk to me and I can talk to them to make sure that they're on board, they understand how I would progress, and they also get a chance, and I get a chance also to make sure that I can help them. So a lot of naturopaths do that as well, and I'd encourage anyone to just ring up, have that little intro consultation, see if they kind of match what you're looking at. If they don't, try someone else. But certainly we're here to work with you, not take everything away that you like, although we will try, but we're not really going to do that.
And I think the best thing is you're not choosing between a doctor and a naturopath. It's actually they're complementing each other along with all the other support that you can have, like your exercise and mindfulness, and meditation, and all of those other things.
Yeah.
So I think this has just been a great, conversation between me and you, and I think there's some great insights that I'm really happy that I can share, or that we can share with.
Great. And you know what? People like you who are doing what you're doing and saying, I'm a layperson. This is not my passion. This is not my field. But as a layperson, I found this and this and this has changed my life and made me much fitter and healthier and happier than what I've ever been before. People like you are really doing wonders to just raise people's awareness that there are other options that will work with where you're at. So I praise to you, because I think it's absolutely fabulous that you have found this passion and you're using it to really help other people. I think that's a brilliant thing to do.
Thanks, darling. But it's my little passion project. It's worked for me, bits and pieces.
Yeah.
Always learning, always work in progress, I'm calling myself.
Yeah, but we all are. And I still learn. Like, I have some people come in and think, oh, that's fantastic. And I write it down, and these great conversations. Like, I think when you're booking, I always book in a little extra at the end, because I know we start going off into we just, we're a bit chatty. Like I said, I chat, clearly.
Well, it's been lovely to connect with you, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm going to pick a couple more topics and we'll do them down the track, because I think there's a lot to talk through about lifestyle management, holistic. So
yeah. And even if you have people who like listen and follow you, if they've got ideas, there's no reason why we can't run, sort of a little bit of an idea of what everybody thinks, because we do approach things differently. So yeah, absolutely.
Love it.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time.
Pleasure. And again, thank you for having me.
Thanks, Narelle.
Bye.